Okay, so today we're diving into something really fascinating
Yeah.
and, frankly, a bit of a paradox, right?
How so?
Well, you've got these two nations, the United States and Iran,
Right.
and they've never actually declared war officially.
Never a declared war, no, but intensely adversarial.
Exactly. For what, over 4 decades now? It's a history just packed with twists, turns, moments where they seemed right on the brink.
It really is. And it's a compelling case study, I think, in sustained geopolitical tension.
Yeah.
Because, the absence of a declared war certainly doesn't mean an absence of conflict.
Not at all.
So our mission today, really, is to go beyond the headlines. We want to distill the key nuggets from the sources you've shared.
Right. Give you a comprehensive understanding without it feeling overwhelming.
Exactly. We'll journey from the origins of this animosity,
Hmm.
look at the major flashpoints
And get into that whole intricate web of proxy conflicts, cyber stuff.
that really defines where they are now, this sort of volatile status.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Where do we start? I guess the story really kicks off with a massive turning point, the 1979 Iranian Revolution.
Absolutely pivotal.
Because before that, the dynamic was totally different, wasn't it? The U.S. and Iran, well, the U.S. supported the Shah of Iran.
A Western-aligned monarch. It was quite a close relationship in many ways, strategically,
An unlikely alliance, perhaps.
perhaps. But the Islamic Revolution just fundamentally shattered that.
Completely.
It overthrew the Shah,
Yeah.
brought Ayatollah Khomeini to power, and just completely reshaped Iran's entire political and religious landscape, almost overnight.
Yeah, it wasn't just swapping leaders.
No, it was a radical reorientation.
Hmm.
The whole new identity for the nation, its place in the world. Everything changed.
And the immediate fallout.
Wow.
Wow, it couldn't have been more direct or shocking.
You're talking about the embassy.
Yeah, later that same year, Iranian students stormed the U.S. Embassy in Tehran.
Right. And what followed was just astonishing. 444 days.
444 days holding 52 Americans hostage. The sources really emphasize this, don't they, as a foundational event.
Absolutely foundational. It led directly to the U.S. cutting all diplomatic ties in 1980.
And that trust, just gone.
Completely fractured. That hostage crisis wasn't just an act of aggression in itself. It fundamentally changed the game.
How so?
It showed that a non-state actor, essentially, could kind of dictate terms to a superpower.
Yeah.
It set this dangerous precedent, arguably, for future interventions, retaliations.
Shaping the rivalry for decades.
Exactly. The very nature of it.
So, okay, diplomatic ties are severed. They're locked in this animosity. How did the conflict continue then, without those direct channels?
Well, it quickly spilled over into major flashpoints, the first big one being the Iran-Iraq War.
Ah, yes, 1980 to 88. Brutal conflict.
8 long years, and the U.S. role there is complex.
We often hear the U.S. indirectly supported Iraq, Saddam Hussein's Iraq, against Iran.
That's the common understanding, yes.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just indirect support happening in a vacuum, meaning there were direct clashes, too, in the Persian Gulf.
Right.
And this really shows how easily these regional conflicts can just suck in external powers.
Leading to devastating consequences.
Absolutely devastating, and sometimes unintended. You have the tragic incident with the USS Vincennes in '88,
Mistakenly shooting down Iran Air Flight 655.
killing 290 civilians. It's just a stark, terrible reminder of how blurred the lines can get.
A truly awful event. So, after those years, sort of Cold War-style proxy fights, the tension seemed to shift, didn't it? Towards Iran's nuclear ambitions.
Yes, particularly in the 2000s onwards. That became central.
Why did that issue become such a core flashpoint, almost existential for both sides, it feels like?
Well, from the U.S. perspective, and its allies too,
Yeah.
the potential for Iran to get nuclear weapons, that was seen as an unacceptable threat to regional stability, global security.
Okay.
But for Iran, developing nuclear capabilities, at least publicly, was framed very differently.
As a right.
As a sovereign right. Exactly. And as a deterrent against external threats, given the history.
So a fundamental disagreement right there.
A fundamental disagreement that just fueled this prolonged crisis.
And this led to some major diplomatic moves, didn't it? Specifically the JCPOA in 2015.
The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, yeah. The Iran nuclear deal.
Iran signed it with the U.S., other world powers,
T5+1, yeah.
agreeing to limit its nuclear activity.
In exchange for sanctions relief.
It really felt like a potential breakthrough at the time, maybe a way to de-escalate things.
It was a monumental diplomatic achievement, no doubt, but a fragile one.
Fragile how?
Well, the deal put real significant constraints on Iran's program, verifiable ones.
Okay.
But and this became crucial, it was designed with these things called sunset clauses.
Ah, meaning parts of the deal would eventually expire.
Exactly. Some key restrictions weren't permanent, and this inherent sort of impermanence,
Yeah.
that became a real point of contention.
And then, of course, things changed dramatically.
Mhm.
2018. President Trump pulls the U.S. out of the deal. Just like that.
Unilaterally withdrew, yes,
Mm-hmm.
and reimposed severe sanctions. Maximum pressure.
What did the sources say about why that was such a pivotal moment? I mean, beyond the obvious policy shift.
Well, it wasn't just about the Iran deal itself. It sent this chilling message, globally really,
Which was?
that U.S. commitments, even major international agreements, could basically be undone by a change in administration.
Undermining trust in diplomacy.
Absolutely. It eroded the foundation of multilateral diplomacy, arguably, made future non-proliferation efforts much, much harder.
And for U.S.-Iran relations.
It reignited so much of the tension, put them right back on a collision course, effectively.
And that collision course nearly led to, well, something much worse in 2020.
You mean the Soleimani assassination?
Yeah. January 2020, a U.S. drone strike kills General Qasem Soleimani, top Iranian commander, in Baghdad.
Right near the airport.
This felt different. A direct, calculated strike against a major state figure. A huge escalation.
Unprecedented, really, in this specific context.
Yeah.
And Iran's response was swift.
They launched missiles.
At U.S. bases in Iraq, yeah. Though it seemed carefully calibrated.
Calibrated how? No deaths, right?
The U.S. deaths, correct.
Yeah.
Though some troops did suffer traumatic bone injuries from the blasts.
Okay.
But the sources, they really highlight this moment as perhaps the closest the two nations have come to open war in modern times.
That's saying something.
It really is, and it raises this crucial question, I think, about modern conflict.
Which is...
What actually constitutes war anymore? When you avoid a direct, declared conflict.
But you take military actions that could easily spark one.
Exactly. It's this new, dangerous kind of strategic brinkmanship.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because even without that declared war, the battleground, it just extends way beyond their borders, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
We see it so clearly with proxy wars.
Mm-hmm. The U.S. and Iran fighting through third parties, using regional conflicts almost like extensions of their own rivalry.
Can you give some examples?
Sure. I mean, what's fascinating is how these places become these sort of crucible points. They're not just extensions of the U.S.-Iran thing. They create their own complex humanitarian crises, political messes.
Right.
So Iraq, for instance. Iran supports various Shia militias there. The U.S. obviously had troops post-2003 invasion and still has interests.
Yes, sir.
Iran backs Bashar al-Assad strongly. The U.S. has, at different times, backed various opposition forces.
Yeah.
Iran supports the Houthis. The U.S. supports Saudi Arabia, which is fighting the Houthis.
Lebanon.
Iran's long-standing support for Hezbollah, which the U.S. designates as a terrorist group.
Wow. So each one is like a separate front.
In an undeclared,
Yeah.
wider conflict, yes.
It's just this incredibly complex web, different factions, different interests.
Deeply invested on multiple sides.
But beyond these, physical battlegrounds,
Yeah.
there's the cyber realm.
Yes. Often unseen, but incredibly impactful.
And that's escalated too, hasn't it? This is a whole new dimension.
Definitely. We've seen major cyber actions from both sides. It's a constant sort of low-grade digital conflict happening under the radar.
Like what?
Well, perhaps the most famous early example was the Stuxnet virus.
Ah, right. U.S.-Israeli developed.
Believed to be, yes. It targeted Iran's nuclear facilities, Natanz specifically.
And it actually caused physical damage, didn't it, through code?
It did. It damaged centrifuges. It was groundbreaking because it showed how digital weapons could affect the physical world, really redefined modern warfare possibilities.
And Iran's response.
Iran, in turn, has been accused of, and sometimes claimed responsibility for, cyber attacks targeting U.S. infrastructure, banks, government systems.
So a constant back and forth in the digital space, too.
Precisely.
Okay, so fast forward to now, let's say roughly 2025. What's the current status? We know no full-scale war.
But still no declared war.
But the hostility is still there, the rhetoric.
Oh, yeah. Ongoing hostilities,
Right.
rhetorical threats. It's like a sustained Cold War, in a way.
That's a good way to put it. Where do tensions spike most often now?
The key flashpoints remain pretty consistent, actually. Iran's nuclear program is always front and center.
Still, even after the JCPOA collapse.
Especially after the JCPOA collapse. Iran has ramped up enrichment since the U.S. withdrawal. So that's a constant source of friction and worry for the U.S. and its allies.
Okay, what else?
Iran's regional influence, its support for those proxy groups we mentioned. Hezbollah, the Houthis, militias in Iraq,
Still a major issue for the U.S.
a fundamental issue. Because these activities are seen as destabilizing and directly counter to U.S. interests and allies in the region.
So these flashpoints, nuclear program, regional influence, proxy support, they just keep the relationship volatile.
Exactly. Because they represent these really fundamental disagreements about security, about power in the Middle East, about each nation's role.
And what about diplomacy in this kind of environment? You mentioned the JCPOA revival attempts.
Yeah, attempts have been made, particularly under the Biden administration, to revive the nuclear deal.
But with limited success, right?
Right. Very limited success so far. It highlights this deeper chasm, really.
What's the chasm?
Well, Iran sees its nuclear program, as we said, maybe as a sovereign right or at least a necessary deterrent. It sees its regional influence as essential for its security, part of its identity.
Okay.
The U.S., on the other hand, views both of those things as direct threats. Threats to regional stability, threats to its allies, threats to its own interests.
So it's like they're operating from completely different worldviews.
Fundamentally different perspectives on security and regional order.
Mm.
And this creates this almost intractable diplomatic deadlock.
Where the underlying mistrust just runs too deep.
The mistrust, the clashing worldviews, it prevents genuine reconciliation much of the time. Solutions become incredibly elusive.
So summing up then, we've got 4 decades, more than 4 decades, of this really complex U.S.-Iran tension. No declared war, but conflict manifesting constantly.
Right, through major incidents pushing them to the brink.
Like the hostage crisis, the Vincennes, Soleimani.
Through these pervasive proxy battles across the entire region.
Iraq, Syria, Yemen.
And now, increasingly, in that unseen but very real world of cyber warfare.
Yeah. Hopefully this deep dive has given you, listening, some aha moments.
Yeah, hopefully shed some light on a relationship that just continues to shape headlines, continues to shape regional stability or instability.
Understanding these patterns, these historical roots, it really is crucial, isn't it, for just grasping global power dynamics.
Absolutely. And the complexities, the nuances of international relations, it's not always black and white.
Definitely not. So as you mull over everything we've talked about today, here's a final thought to consider. Given this whole historical trajectory we've mapped out, this constant dance between direct confrontation, proxy fights, cyber attacks, sometimes diplomacy, what might be the next unexpected development?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Right, and how might whatever that is impact the broader global landscape? Because it surely would.
It's a dynamic that's always evolving.
Yeah.
Often in ways that completely surprise us.
Something to keep an eye on for sure.